All right. Welcome to Fight Words, everybody. And today we have the privilege, nay, the grandeur, to introduce Ted Elsner, the principal instructor at Sacramento Historical Fencing Academy. Hey, Ted.
Hey, guys.
All right. We dragged your happy ass on here so that we could talk about competition. Especially, we wanted to talk to you about Festival Sacramento. So, tell us about your event.
Okay, so our event, which sadly we had to cancel this year like so many others, is kind of a different take on the way we want to approach competition in historical fencing. So we, over the last 5 years now, have kind of evolved the event. It started out like so many events with a standard kind of point-based system where, you'd have your usual ladder kind of format, and it's evolved. We took a rule set that was originally developed in New York. We affectionately refer to it as the knife point rules, where it's a kind of structure whereby you track both lives lost and points earned. And we've evolved it over time to really fit our needs and really make for an event that lets you come with the intent to fight a lot of different people without necessarily having, a lot of time invested with any one person. Our goal is to get all the people that come to our event to fight a significant portion of the field of battle, as it were, the other competitors. Yeah, so that's kind of the basics of it. We can go into all the details, like it'll get kind of complex. So maybe handle those each on their own.
Well, what was the needs that you were seeing that you needed to evolve your event into?
We were looking at things like the some of the stuff from Swordfish, some of the stuff from some of the big events where you'd see fights drag on for a long period of time. And certainly in like an MMA style or boxing style match, there's a real value in seeing somebody be able to come back from a losing scenario and push forward to a win. And that's well represented in the community. But what we weren't seeing happen was the reality of weapons combat, where can you fight back from some of the hits that people take, right? And so you have somebody comes out strong and they're able to land a couple of early points on someone that, let's be honest, were fight enders, right? They stabbed that guy through the face. They stabbed that person right through, the throat or the chest. That fight was done. But because of the format, people were able to come back and win on points. And so we wanted to not try and represent the real fight, because that's never a possible thing, but we wanted to focus on the ability to show those first interactions and highlight the people that can come out strong, and they will beat you in the first or second exchange. But you might then learn from them and be able to come back and win on points, and we didn't want that.
You want someone who could come out and take control of the fight immediately versus somebody who will let you fight and maybe even intentionally like, okay, I'm going to be a little sloppy at the beginning to see what your philosophy is, and then I'm going to use my athleticism later in the 2 to 3 to 5 minute long game to be able to win it out.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so the problem there, like I said, in a boxing context, in a MMA, kind of context, where punches and holds are certainly damaging, but not necessarily immediately fight ending, that works. But is that something you want to encourage if we were imagining these to be real sharps, right? Do I want to maybe take the chance of taking that like I said, that thrust to the face so that I can come back and win later? I don't want that, right? I don't want to get hit. I don't want to get stabbed in the face.
Ted, you're telling me you don't want to take a sharp sword to the face. What kind of fencer are you?
Hopefully the type that will encourage others to not want to take a sharp sword to the face and only deliver a sharp sword to the face.
Okay. Ooh, I like that answer. I want to interject and kind of put a finer point on this thing you're talking about. So here in the hemoculture of the Midwest, we spend a lot of time talking about martial versus sport application, right? Like that's the hot way to say it, I guess. Right. How would you feel like this philosophy you're describing fits into that argument in the grander scale?
Yeah, right. Like I've said now a couple of times that I don't want to get into the real fight idea. Sure. What I would say is that we want a martial mindset in a sport environment, right? Okay. So we're trying for that martial mindset, which to us means don't get hit, because if you're getting hit, that's potentially every single hit, I mean, even to the hands, is potentially a fight ender. But at the same time, it's all a game. So we're going to have to embrace the game side of things, right? And go from there. So kind of a little bit of one or the other. And we you know, our event is not a hard-hitting event because of the format of it. We have very few injuries, and the injuries that we've had in the last couple of years were people hurting themselves, not hurting each other, right? Somebody turning an ankle, or somebody trying something that throws out their back, right? But not, I'm going to pick you up and slam you to the ground. I'm not going to pommel strike you to the head. I'm not going to do these things because aggression levels have ramped up over the course of a minute multi-point match to now we're slugging it out. We don't have that happen. And in fact, our rule set really has a tendency to punish some of those kind of approaches to the fight.
I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
So one of the things that like we implemented as well was like double kills and whatnot subtract from you, because the idea is not like, okay, I hit him in the head, he hits me in the arms, well, I'm going to win more points. Well, why don't I just adopt this guard and you know, helicopter the whole fight? And
so let me maybe to address that. Let me talk about our specific rules.
Yes.
Right. Because that I think will. Yeah.
Before you do that, and we may have to edit to make this work, but I want to jump in on two things that you said and ask about them specifically. I think this is kind of important. This is probably one of the things that is worth talking about, based on how you're describing your event. What are some of the specific ways in which you keep injuries to a minimum? Because that's a very impressive thing to say. I'm glad to hear you say that. I care about. I've taken middle school students to tournaments and coached them, and one of my biggest worries is that we'll see one of those waffles, you know, on a 12-year-old, and I'm going to have to call a parent, you know, like.
Right.
So what is it you've done specifically that you feel like has helped deal with that?
Our specific thing, and it'll get into when we talk about the rules, is that we observed from watching fights, whether they were our own or other events, that injuries happen most often as the fight progresses. It's very rare for an injury to happen in the first couple of exchanges. It happens as you're getting into, you know, depending on the timeline of the match, those last few minutes, those last few seconds where either aggression has ramped up because it's been a back and forth, maybe somebody felt cheated on a call, or points are closed down and people are trying to just buffalo power through it. And so we said, okay, the damage happens at the end of these exchanges. So our structure, and it's evolved a little bit to it, but basically we don't have a time limit. We don't have a point. Every single exchange, within reason, we'll talk about it, is a sudden death exchange. So you never get to the point where you can get so ramped up with your opponent that control goes out the window, that bad things happen.
Well, I can speak as a heavyweight who fights that the longer you go, the more fatigue sets in. That is definitely when the injuries are going to happen, because kind of like you said, I'm getting more frustrated. I'm getting mentally and physically more fatigued. My techniques are just becoming simpler and more brutal because I can't think of how to be artful at this point. All I can think of is how to just keep going and keep winning at any cost at that point. Because, I mean, as energy goes down, decision making becomes simpler and the more caveman one becomes.
Yep.
So go ahead.
I mean, I've seen it in myself as well, right? Like I know for matches I've been in where I've gotten the ugliest was when it came down to maybe I'm behind in points, right? And the rules of the game really at that point encourage me to just go hard and fast because I'm going to lose anyway, so I might as well take those dangerous, you know, kind of risks to get there.
Well, my other question is to do with kind of like philosophy and culture. So let's go ahead and stick on this for just a minute and then segue into that. What would you say? So describe to us the rules and how you've adjusted them and evolved them to focus on that, to keep the injuries down, to keep the bouts shorter. How did you do that?
Right. And so what's actually happened was early on we did those long matches. And then when we switched to our new rule set, initially the way that it ran was a single exchange format where you were going to get your time fighting not against 1 to 4 or 5 other people over the course of a few minutes each, but by fighting every other person in the tournament. But to make that work, we had to limit the number of like exchanges, and our first iteration of it was one good exchange was our rule for it. So I would face off against you, and we would fight until there was a clear exchange that happened that the judges, the fencers, everybody agreed on was, okay, that was, no slop, no, I don't know, it didn't hit, it didn't land kind of environment. And so it was that one clean exchange per person. And so matches went really fast. Like I'd step up, I'd fight you, we'd be out, next people would be in, they'd fight, and you'd round robin through everyone really, really quickly. Okay. This was hard for people at first that hadn't done our tournament before, because they would step in, they'd come in, and you'd see what happens in so many tournaments, double. And we would call double. They would both lose a life, and their exchange and their match with each other would be done. And that would be it. So it never had the ability to go further than that. And then we found that was a little unfair to the people that came first, because, again, we were tracking how many lives. When they're out of lives, they're out of the tournament. That we had to adjust to our modern kind of setup. But it was really eye-opening really fast. People realized, oh, shit, I need to take this seriously, because if I come in and hit him and he hits me, that's it, game over, right? If the judges see it and we all saw it, next match. And so people started taking each match a little slower, feeling out their opponent before just powering into each other.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is it's kind of a weird thing for us, because when we go further north, when you get more of the traditional rule sets compared to it, fighters are not usually allowed to comment on their exchange. Usually it's
surprised me when I went north.
Yeah, because whenever we went up north, we're like, do we get a say? And they're like, no, it's just judges and the ringmaster, and they all roll with this. So,
which I want to clarify, like that as a rule set doesn't bother me. It's just, it was surprising. That's not the culture that we have thought in here.
Right. And for us, our culture was a little bit different. We've evolved it over time. Initially, it was that as a fencer, you're welcome to always wave off any of your hits, right? So if I strike you and I felt it was flat, I can say, no, it was no good. But you can't, say, oh, this, that, or the other about a strike on you, because you don't know, right? It could have been flat, it could have been on an edge, you got hit or you didn't. So we didn't allow people to call hits on themselves. Somebody would say, oh, I felt a hit here. It's like, well, it might have been flat. The judges felt it wasn't quality. That's nice that you felt you got hit, but you don't get to call your own hits. You only get to say my hit was no good. And so that was kind of our culture for it. We have since evolved to the point where we allow the fencers to have a much larger say in the outcome of their exchanges, because we've also reduced the number of judges. Originally, we were running a really heavy number of judges with like 4 judges and 1 director, and yeah, it was too much.
The staffing on that, it's got to be a nightmare alone.
It was a nightmare. People were getting just completely worn out. And our system of scoring made it easy for the judges, but we just found that it was better to have 1 director, 1 judge, and then have the fencers involved in the exchange and outcomes as well.
So are you still doing single exchanges then? Or you said something about having evolved that. I'd love to hear what that
means. Right. So let's get into the rules then, because I think that'll probably be the best one. Let's talk about the structure, and then I'll talk about the scoring and everything first.
Okay.
Afterwards, rather. So the structure of the tournament, as it exists now, is what we call our dance card system. We do an analog-based format rather than a ladder, where at the start of the match, or excuse me, at the start of the tournament, you get a document that includes on it every other fencer that is going to be in your weapon. And we run, this year we would have run 3 weapons. Last year we ran 2 weapons, and it's run concurrently. So there's no first long sword, then side sword. Everything happens all at once. So let's say I have my card. I go in and say, oh, look, there's this Kyle guy. I've never fenced him before. I hunt out Kyle and say, hey, Kyle, I'm Ted. Do you want to fence? Right? And he says, sure, let's go fence. Because he can't turn it down, because that's, you don't get to say no to a dance.
That's the rules.
So he, we go over to the table, we get in line. When it's our turn to come up, we present our documents at the table. The score will be recorded there, as well as on our own tracking documents. And so then we get to go in and we have our dance. And the way our dance works is we get 3 exchanges. Now, the exchanges have to be good exchanges. They have to be something that there's a clear outcome from. Otherwise, the director will throw it out, call it a null exchange that doesn't count for anything, and it'll be a do-over. So if we get in and it's ugly, whatever, we'll redo that. We want 3 outcomes. Those outcomes can be win, which would be win-loss, and I'll go into what that means. Highest bleeder, double, or no exchange, which I know, contrary to what it just sounded like I said, is counted as an exchange. So let's start at the no exchange and work our way up. No exchange. Kyle and I come out. Bing, we feel each other out. Tat, 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 little back and forth between each other. And then we separate our distance. That was an exchange. No points are awarded. No lives are deducted. But we've learned something about each other, okay, during that. I should mention, we don't call halt unless one of two things happens after an exchange. That is, the fencers break distance from each other and move out of measure, or one of them steps out of bounds. Stepping out of bounds will end the exchange, but there's no penalty to score for it. In fact, that's part of it because you can use the rate to your advantage.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. So that was the null exchange, right? That's the no exchange. We said, okay, it's fine, but we've used one of our three. But we've learned something. I've learned about Kyle. He's learned about me. So then on the next exchange, let's say it results in a double. A double is going to be we each land a hit on each other of equal value, right? And so the way we keep it is really, really simple for our targeting. The lowest value target are the hands because they're the closest thing. So you can strike to the hands or arms. We don't like finger shots, but anything back of the hand up is fine. And that would be considered a hit. After that, it works its way up from legs, torso, head. So the higher the hit, the better the quality. If we get the same strike on each other, and they don't have to be at the same time, that's a double. So I come in maybe and I strike and I arm snipe Kyle, but I don't clear distance. He closes after me and prevents the exchange from ending as I try and back out. And as I'm trying to back out, he hits me on the arm as well, and then I step out of bounds. That's a double because we both hit each other at an equal value target. I wasn't able to end the exchange by either stepping out of bounds in time or breaking distance from Kyle, right? I hit him and I tried to get away, but he followed, right? So whether it was an afterblow, whether they happened exactly at the same time, it doesn't matter. I got hit, so we have to take that into account. And because we both hit each other in the arm, double. We both lose a life, making us that much closer to being done with the tournament.
I'm going to interject just because I'm curious. Is there a time limit on that? Let's say Kyle and I are fighting and he hits me in the arm, but I'm able to press distance and I'm able to hang in there for 10 more seconds and pommel him in the face.
There is no time. There it does. And that then would bring us to the next level up on what can happen in the exchange, right? So you press in, right? Kyle hits you in the arm. He tries to back out. You say, no, son, like this isn't over yet, right? Because maybe it was a fight under, maybe it wasn't. We don't know. So we'll track it, but we're not going to end it. So you press in and you get in and you pommel him in the face. You now get awarded the highest bleeder, right? Because you've struck the head. It's a higher target. You gain nothing. We're not going to score you a point, right? Yeah, literally. We're not going to score you a point. We're not going to reward you for that because the reality is you got hit. You took a hit to get that head. So you don't deserve to earn a point.
Okay.
But you're not going to lose a life either. But Kyle is going to lose a life, right? Because he hits you low, you hit him high. He lost that exchange, right? There's no question. You took it in the arm, he took it in the face. If I had to choose between those two, yeah, hit me in the arm, don't pommel strike my face. But he lost. But you don't win. So he loses a life, you gain nothing, you lose nothing.
Okay.
The best exchange is Kyle comes in, he strikes a target, arm, torso, whatever, and then he breaks distance. Or he was really smart and he had maneuvered the fight to be next to the edge of the ring. And after landing that strike, he immediately steps out of bounds. We call halt because he's using the tactical landscape to his advantage. He maneuvered the fight such that he could land a hit and then step out and end the exchange, right? In that scenario, that's a win. Kyle gains a point, which will put him that much closer to winning the tournament. You lose a life. Kyle doesn't lose any lives. Then you pick up your cards, you shake your hands after 3 exchanges of that, you pick up your cards and you go find somebody else to fight.
You see, I have so many thoughts swirling because I haven't heard this in its entire deal, because this allows, one, you have all the stages of the fight. You're approaching, you have your initial engagement, you have your Krieg work, but then the most important that you typically don't see at tournaments is the abzoog and getting the withdrawal. Because most of the time in a tournament, it's go, boom, hit, and then a lot of times it ends up they pause on each other or they just hit each other and then continue to hit each other until someone jumps in there. So
right now,
No, I
I should answer to that, because if it turns into that slog where people just bam, 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 bam are hitting each other, then the director will step in, throw the staff, and stop that fight, because it's a double at that point, right? As soon as we see equal targets being landed on each other, there's no point continuing. It can't
that's
be
not
anything
hard anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's a peasant fight.
I'm particularly fascinated by the way you keep talking about strategy in a way that I haven't heard on this podcast or in my Midwest HEMA circles. It talked about in a very practical way.
Yeah, we get a lot of it results from Northern California being this little island unto ourselves, right? Where there's only a couple other clubs that are large enough to be able to hold events. And then everything else is at least a 6-hour drive away, right, at best, right? We can go down to Southern California is our arguably closest up for SoCal Sword Fight, or we can go up to Sword Squatch. Like that's our two kind of closest big events that we can get to. And so we wanted to highlight different things than we were seeing at those events and what we were seeing at our other local tournaments. One of the other local tournaments does like a Nordic rule set for theirs, which is, everybody knows those. Another one does kind of just a typical generic HEMA rule set, right? Ours, we wanted it to focus on some different stuff. For that tactical element that Kyle mentioned, our ring that we use, our space that we had has a volleyball court in the middle of it, and so we play across the length of the court, and you essentially get a third of that court to play in. So it's a rectangular space that's a good 25 feet from side to side that you start in. So you start out of measure. A personal pet peeve of mine is, and it happens at so many events, where no matter how big the ring is, people will run close together, touch swords, and then back up maybe one step. So they're already starting in and sometimes they're already starting in measurement, right? They're starting at a distance where it's like, well, neither of you actually need to take a step to really land a strike. You've thrown away the entire first third of the fight of being able to use measure and come in and close distance and be forced to have to deal with these things. So we start people really, really far away. And because of the limited exchanges, it's really not a great idea to step in and maybe do that. Oh, let's do polite touching of swords beforehand. It's like, no, why? Why are you doing that? And again, we're Meyer guys, so there's some stuff that always influences us, like Meyer's line about, hit him before he's ready. Be the first on the field, right? Yeah. And so if I step in, I've lost the ability to do that. If I touch swords, the game's we've just changed it up. Where's my ability to just charge you before you even have a chance to respond?
Yeah, well, I'm going to interject with a funny story because I think it matters. The culture that we train in at Simbrogi does not do that. Right. It's not something I was ever taught when I was a newling at all. And then one of my very first out-of-town tournaments, I'm walking to the ring and somebody walks in and holds their sword out. And I'm like, oh, great, a hand target. Boom. Just first thing. And the poor guy was freaked. I don't even think he was mad. He just didn't expect it because he was ready for a polite. I guess I came off as a jerk. I apologized, all that. But yeah, it removes, I was excited a moment ago to hear you talking tactics. And so this feels right in line with that because it seems so tactically deficient I want to be polite. I want to be offensive defenses with honor. I want to care personally about all of my opponents. I love the community so much in HEMA. But when I'm at a tournament, I want to be showing my art. I want to be fighting. I want to. Right. This is not the hug. The hug is after.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. Hug after the match. Talk. But again, you've had the time to have this discussion in our rule set with the person before you fight them. Right. Because you'll have found each other and you'll have said, hey, let's fight. Cool. You got to have that exchange then. And then afterwards, you can talk about it afterwards. But when you're in the ring, yeah, it's all a game, and I'm gonna say it again and again. We're not trying to represent realism, but respect it as being real, right? Step in and fight the person. Don't touch swords. Don't do all that kind of stuff. I personally, I don't even particularly like salutes, right? I get salutes being a part of later traditions. I get salutes being part of other cultural traditions. I don't see it in the medieval mindset for that, right? Salutes and reverence, as it is something that's reserved for your betters, for someone that's a noble, right? I don't salute you. You're not better than me. You're an equal to me. So I don't need to give you that reverence. Like that's sorry, that's kind of BS, right? Like instead, I'll respect you by treating you as the threat that you are. That's the kind of element that I'm looking for in it.
Yeah, man, we're gonna get lost down into attitude again, but we'll come back to that because I'm really interested. But first, I have two specific questions about the rule set you described.
Yeah,
and I'm kind of go backwards. My first one, and I don't want to get way lost in the weeds and just talk about this for an hour, but do you find that your highest bleeder outcome is controversial?
No.
Really?
No.
That surprises me. Tell me about that.
It ends up being that I would say that from the people that fought in our tournament, when there's a higher bleeder called, everybody's really, really clear on what it was that happened, right? Because if there was an argument, if there was a disagreement, if there's like, judges didn't really see, one judge saw, and the fencers aren't sure, and because we allow the fencers to have a say in it, we throw it out. We throw out the exchange and we do it again. But it ends up being more often than not because we've simplified targets so much, and there is no point question, right? It's all just priority. I know I got hit in the arm, and I know I hit you in the head, or vice versa, right? We know that outcome. We've simplified the targeting down so that people aren't really debating over it. And also, I know that it's a double essentially, in that I lose a life, but you're not going to benefit from it. You're not one step closer to winning the tournament because you got me that one time, because I got you too. I took away that point from you, right? So yeah, no one has ever complained to us about the highest bleeder portion.
Interesting.
In a bigger scale version of that question, do you wind up with the martial versus sport argument playing into that ever at all?
I don't think so. Like we've had guys come from other areas as well. One that I know that has been out with you guys, Chris Yang. I think you guys know Chris, right? Sure. So Chris would travel up from Southern California to fight with us, and he would bring the way that he fights with his hard, fast striker rounds, and he would do quite well. Chris would regularly, place in the top percentages of our tournaments, but he wouldn't necessarily win because even though he was going for that hard and fast style, we have other people that are playing a much more technical game that takes it away, right? We pride ourselves as a technical school, and we want to see technical fighting. So, and again, like, I have a really hard time with the martial versus sport argument. I'll admit I don't fully understand what people mean by that, right? Because I've seen some people say, oh, that was really, really martial. And I go, well, yeah, but it was also really, really stupid, because if those were with actual swords, that thing he was doing was the dumbest thing you could do, because he landed that strike, except like, look where that sword ended up. Was that worth it to play that game where, you got your other guy, but his sword ended at your neck. It didn't hit with enough force to be called a point, but I don't want my sharp sword ever against my neck. Like, we do test cutting and I play with my swords, and no.
Exactly.
No.
Oh my God.
So that's why I have a really hard time with the martial versus sport, right? Like, treat weapons as real. You never know what's going to kill you, right? Whether it's a strike to the hand that causes you to then go into shock and die, or a stab through the face that you survive. We don't know. We have to structure everything around it. And
do you not feel like that statement right there is a support of the martial side of the martial versus?
Sure. Maybe a better question would be, do you feel that's a support of the martial side of things? Because like I said, I don't really understand the debate as it occurs for a lot of people.
Yeah. No, and I agree. I think when we want to talk about martial versus sport, which everybody wants to talk about, I've mentioned it like 6 times. I know. Yeah. But part of the problem is we wind up talking past each other, which is why I want to kind of drive you to a point on this. When I say martial versus sport, I have a thing that martial means in my head. I have a thing that sport means in my head. I have scenarios and examples that are frustrating me from tournaments past. And you have the same things, but probably different. So I'm glad to hear you kind of talk that through.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess let me try and define it, and you tell me if it makes sense to you. I think martial fencing doesn't have to do with power. It has to do with treating the weapons as real, and that at any moment, if I screw up, it could result in my death. Whereas sport fencing is, well, I'm just going to use pure athleticism, and I'm not going to care that the thing that I'm doing, I might win because I'm faster, always, right? And maybe it's not technically good, but because I'm in better shape, because I'm a better physically abled person to do it. And my issue there is that there's always somebody faster. There's always somebody bigger. That's the problem with a sport mentality, is you might be the fastest fish in your little pond, but what happens when you go play, in a bigger lake or a bigger ocean? There's gonna be somebody that can eat your face. So get fast, get in good shape, be able to do your techniques with athleticism, but don't rely on the athleticism to be the thing that makes you the best at the game you're playing.
Right, because as a heavyweight and as a person who loves to get in close, like when I first started doing tournaments, I relied on just getting in close and overpowering people. Yep. Then I met Legault, who's 6'8", nicknamed the Mountain, and I could not throw Legault. And so after that tournament and a few others, I was noticing like I needed to enhance my skills and my tactics, because the over-reliance on attributes just ends up that way.
Right.
Something I want to bring in, kind of going with that, since I am a close-quarters fighter, one of the things I run into is a lot of forbidden techniques, such as like throws and whatnot. Do you have any of those for your event?
We do, and it's not because we are anti-throw. I've been involved in some controversies that I'm not going to bring up regarding stuff. I've promised not to talk about that part anymore. What I will say is that for our tournament, we don't allow throws that go to the ground, and it's purely a question of our environment. We fight on a wooden floor. We do not have any kind of padding, right? And so doing a fight that's going to be a grappling heavy event is not something that we feel safe doing in that environment. For myself, like I was a wrestler when I was in high school. Like I have no problem, I'm that Einlaufen guy. Like I for the longest time would get in, let's take it to a grapple. Maybe I'll throw a headbutt to distract you, kind of thing. I was known as a serial headbutter, right? So I don't have a problem with grappling, even though that's sometimes what people think that I do. It's like, no, guys, it's what's appropriate to the local environment and to the expectations of the grander community. I've actually worked with Jude Ledesma. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He's on the GC of the Hema Alliance. He runs a club in the Bay Area in California. He's a BJJ guy as well, so he's a heavy grappler background. We've talked about coming up with a tournament to be run at his club, because they are in a BJJ gym that's fully padded, that would focus on doing ringing, right, as an element. And so of having that grappling based fencing tournament. And for that, we were specifically looking at rules that would be asymmetrical to set up grappling scenarios that make sense. My issue with grappling goes back to one of sport versus martial. Grappling with swords, in my opinion, that's sport. If you're going for that, it's not martial, because you're taking something from a more lethal weapon-based system to a less lethal grappling scenario, which, right? But I mean, that's the reality of it. Is I don't want to, like, you got a knife, I don't want to grapple with you like that. I don't want to have that happen. But at the same time, we're increasing the risk to the other competitor by doing that, because we've taken something from a safe, non-sharp weapon environment to a grappling scenario where arms can get broken, somebody can land on things, danger has increased. And so like that's been my issue with it for a lot of events, is it fails on both the martial and the sport sides, because it's less martial but more dangerous sportiness to it. So that's why we were trying to design a tournament specifically that would use padded weapons in a padded floor with padded walls, so that you could, and an asymmetrical environment where one person's goal is to use a weapon and the other person's goal is to take the person, basically capture him, hostage, whatever, and have that work out so that you could bring those things into effect.
Yeah,
I got a lot of thoughts on that. We would probably go outside of the.
Okay, sure. Well, but that seems like a good overview. I really appreciate that. So I have one more question about specific rules I'd love to hear you talk about, and then we can move on to the other tournaments and stuff.
Well, I have one more as well. But
okay, so mine, then his, and then we'll move on. Okay. So just not very long ago on this podcast, we had Anthony Bonomo on here talking and defending his single exchange rules at the Weird Open in Austin, whose shirt I am repping today. I'm going to go ahead and just be that shill. And it was interesting. He kind of went back and forth on that, and he strongly defended the single exchange. So I'm really curious, not to pit you two against each other, but simply for comparison, I want to hear you talk about why you went from a single exchange into the 3 exchange concept.
Yes. Yeah, so we took it from the 1 to the 3 because specifically we were finding that it was unfair to people at the start because of the way that we were tracking things. Where we would come out and we would get punished as the first fencers because we didn't really understand the format of the tournament, and so boom, that was crap. There went some of my points, and now I'm at a disadvantage for the rest of the gaming of the event. Also, we had some feedback that people wanted to have a little bit longer with the other person. They didn't want the scenario where they've been waiting to fight this person. And they get single exchange, and it was all over and it was done. We wanted to see that. Also, we wanted to put in, again, a tactical element. In my ideal scenario for the way that I would like to see it play out is the first exchange between any 2 people should almost always be a no exchange call. We come out, we do a little pre-fencing, we feel each other out a little bit, we back out and we develop our plan, and now, okay, we got 2 exchanges to try and pull our plan off. Like in my perfect world, that's how things would play out, is people would come out, they would feel each other out in the first exchange most of the time, and then they would come back together and make one of the last 2 really be the one where they try and win.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and that's really what drove it, was the desire to let people fence a little bit more, and then on top, have that tactical element. I will say that our dance card system worked so well that we also have no problem with the 3 exchanges because things just run so smooth and so fast. I mentioned earlier that we run multiple weapons concurrently. So you might decide, and this year we would have done 3 weapons, which sucks that we had to cancel that next year. So maybe you're fighting both side sword, which in this case we defined as sword plus offhand and longsword. It didn't matter. You could go fence people from either card at either time, and you'd go to the same rings that everybody was fighting in. So you would just, the refs would just be told, hey guys, this is going to be a side sword exchange. This is going to be a longsword exchange, right? So we didn't have any of those issues that so often occur of, oh, I'm going to go fight a bunch of longsword matches, and oh, now I got to fight side sword in the afternoon, or vice versa. It created a certain kind of fun game for people to figure out, do I want to get my sword matches, side sword matches out of the way early? Do I want to kind of intersperse back and forth? It just added a whole extra kind of, meta layer to the game for people. And it just ran so smooth. Like in the past, the first couple of years we ran our tournament, because we were doing a kind of laddered round robin system, we ran late. Like we would start and things would just go for hours. And it was a lot, and people were getting tired, and it just was bad. This last year, we ran both tournaments. We finished on time. We were able to break for lunch. Everybody was happy with the flow. Things just moved smooth and beautiful. It was great.
That's awesome. I want to make an observation, not a question, but you seem to value, kind of the game inside the game and the personal responsibility in managing your day and your mindset as much as the fighting.
Yes, absolutely.
That's interesting to me. That's kind of a new thing on me.
Everybody gets something different from their experience, right? Some people want to go in and they just want to swing for the fences. Cool, that's fine. Some people want to go in and they want to fight as many people as they can over the course of the tournament. Some people want to go in and maybe they want to warm up with somebody they know already, and I already know this guy, so I'll fight him first to kind of get myself ready to go. Whereas other people want to go challenge who's the big dog. I don't know that guy, but I've seen him. I want to fight him first, right?
Looking at you, Kyle.
Hey, I didn't
I don't want to dictate to the competitors what their strategy for the tournament is, right? Like that's adding the strategic element into it. Is how do I determine who I'm going to fight first, who I'm going to fight second, right? Like that's you. You have to figure out your game plan first. Yeah. Then you get to implement your tactics, right, in the fight itself. Like, for myself, my first matches, unless I've gotten some good warm-ups with a friend or something, oh man, I have a huge adrenaline peak. I'm sloppy as hell. I'm all over the goddamn place. And then I can settle down. I can find my happy place, and then I can fight the way that I want to fight. And that's when I do my best, right? Is when I'm there. So for me, this kind of structure would be great, because I would go choose someone that I don't have anything to prove against. I know him. We fought 100 times, and I maybe find a club mate and be like, hey, let's have our first match against each other, right? And maybe the whole thing just ends up as 3-0 exchanges. We know that, hey, we don't want to take any lives from each other, but we want to get that out of the way, right, and get warmed up. And that's maybe the way that I want to approach it. But then, Kyle shows up and says, who's the champion from last year? Oh, I'm going to take him out early.
That's
right?
literally would be the third person I would fight. Be like,
That's why I
warm
like
up guy, really warmed up guy. Where the hell's last year's champion? Because I'm fighting him while I'm fresh.
That is Kyle's attitude.
And so, exactly. So that's it. So bringing to everybody the game, because it's all the game that they want to play, right? I want to create a structure that you can come in and have as much flexibility to play your game as is possible within my rules.
So what were the 3 weapons going to be this year?
So the way that we were going to do it this year is we were basically going to do Myers 3 swords, which would be longsword like we've had. We did the side sword plus offhand as the side sword, largely because there's another school in Sacramento. There's the Sacramento Sword School, which is Eric Myers and Puck Curtis. You might have heard of those guys before. They do Destreza. They do a lot of, sword and offhand. And so we wanted to make sure to cater to them a little bit, and our other clubs did that. The third weapon we would have done would have been Dusac, and I'm air quoting that because really by that we mean is the sword alone. A single-handed, no offhand sword, right? Myers says the Dusac is the trainer for any weapon used by itself. Cool. So if you want to come out with a Dusac, you can use a Dusac. If you want to come out with a long, a side sword, you can use a side sword. Whatever. It's weapon alone. No 40-inch rapiers that we weren't going to allow. We didn't want to play that game as part of it. But that was going to be the 3 weapons. So long sword, sword alone, sword plus offhand.
Awesome. So if I was wanting to come out, not that I'm saying this for my own self, but I wanted to prepare for this tournament, what would I need to do to prepare for it?
So besides your normal kind of conditioning, kind of ramp up to a tournament that everybody should be doing, right? Like just it's going to be something. For us specifically, realizing with only 3 exchanges that it's going to be a marathon, not a sprint. Right? You don't need the conditioning to be able to last 5-6 minutes at a time. That's not going to be something that you're looking for, because you're probably going to, it might take that long, but that's not really the issue. But you're potentially going to be fighting 30 other people, right? You might fight every other person in the tournament, depending on, how your gameplay works out, how their lives match up. And so you want to plan for that long day, right? Have your strategy in place of how am I going to get through this day of fighting, and especially if you're doing 3 weapons. If you're just doing a single weapon, it's not that hard, right? Like that's a relatively easy day. That's what I would encourage for any first time, kind of tournament entrant is choose a weapon. Just do that. It'll be pretty chill. You'll be able to come out. You'll have some good matches. It'll be fun. 2 weapons, okay. You're going to start to feel that, right? Because you've just doubled the number of matches that you're going to have over the course of the day. And when we go to the 3 weapon, I mean, that's going to be an Iron Man. You're going to probably fight 90 separate opponents. There might be 30 guys, but you could fight.
I need your pants after that statement.
Oh my God.
You're right. Like it could end up being that many. Like again, it's hard to define exactly. Right. Yeah. And that's what we want. We want you to come out and we want you to fight a lot of different people. That's our goal, is ideally don't fight the people that are from your club. You see them every day, right? Fight them if you have to at the end, but go find new friends. Go, make a new friend and try and stab them in the face. That's
I mean,
the best part about it.
One of the things that we were kind of struggling with whenever we were first formulating the rules for Gesellfechten and stuff like that is I wanted to fight every single person and just single double exchange, and then that way it's like a tournament of who won versus everyone. And this sounds more up that line because we kind of went toward, well, we'll talk about Gesellfechten in another episode. But I mean, this does give you the ability. It's like, okay, I'm strategic. I know people. It's depending on your level. Like I might just show up as a newbie and go, I'm gonna do this one event and this is gonna be fun. And then I'm not injured, but it's like that was fun. Versus the guy who's like, I'm gonna win this whole thing, has a master strategy who can actually implement it. Versus oh my God, I just spent 3 minutes slogging it out with this guy and then another guy immediately. And then I had to do it 3 more times during my pools. And now I'm exhausted. And by God, I really hope I make it to the bracket at this point.
Right, and we don't have that, right? Like that's not something that occurs within ours. You don't have that pressure of I got to get through my pools and then I'm going to get through the brackets. Because we're tracking based on total wins, it's just a giant pool setup, right? It's just a giant dance. So you get to define that part of your game. And it does make it fun because, you know, you can go take out that champion guy in the first match, right? Maybe Kyle goes in and says, okay, that's the winner from last year. I'm going to go take him out in my third match. And let's say you win. Let's say you go in and you clean the floor with him. The reality is you didn't take him out of the tournament. He might still win the tournament, maybe because, you know, he's a home field advantage. He knows how the system runs. He cleans everybody else's clock, and you gas out because you put all of your, you know, emotions, all of your energy, everything you had into those 3 fights against him, and you peaked early, right? Because you treated it as a sprint, and maybe, you know, you start to run on fumes and you do okay. You score in the top, you know, 50%, 25%, 10%, but you just, you know, maybe you got a lot of doubles. Maybe you got a lot of highest bleeders that didn't score you points but cost you energy. And he got more, right? And again, that's part of the game that I like. It's a different element. There's so many tournaments that do ladder, you know, pools into brackets. There are so many that do Swiss style formats. There's all those other structures out there that we didn't want to recreate that. And, you know, we're not saying that our tournament is what every tournament should run. And in fact, we vehemently feel that should not be the case. But we, you know, but if our tournament style was run at, you know, 1 in every region, that would be awesome. Right, we feel each tournament should have different rules.
That's interesting. I want to just say before we jump to this next bit, you're describing a tournament that sounds like a hell of a lot of fun.
Oh my God!
I'm excited to try to make it to your tournament next year after talking to you, and hopefully everybody watching this is feeling the same way. And if you're not, go back and listen again because this man's describing something that even whether you love it or hate it, sounds exciting to try.
Yeah, and I am going to sweeten the pot a little bit. We had plans this year with the 3 weapon system for the first time to offer prizes. It's not something we've done in the past. You know, we give medals, we give awards, we give stuff like that, little tchotchkes. This next year, we'll have some prizes. We'll have prizes that I think will appeal to certain segments of the community in particular. Kyle might know a little bit about some of the ones we'll offer, as well as some of the other ones that are going to be, you know, coming down the line as well.
All right.
But yeah, so we'll even, you know, make it worth your while a little bit to come out and you know, encourage you to do all 3 weapons as part of it.
Very cool. Well, let's jump ahead. We've spent actually a lot of time talking about your rule set, which I'm excited we did because this was really fun. I personally have enjoyed this conversation because it's kind of outside my normal. So thank you for that. But let's go ahead. Since it's so different, let's jump in. I'm not going to ask you to rag on anybody specifically or anything like that, but we are going to talk a little bit about how you compare your tournament scene and culture to other tournaments you've been to and things like that. But let's start with your idea, or pre-COVID, your idea for regional tournaments.
Right. So this was something that had started up just before COVID. We had gotten a couple of matches in, and then obviously we had to stop. We wanted to do a league format. And a couple of years ago, we had kind of the typical, you know, HEMA tournament league where, we're going to track wins at all the various tournaments and, you know, kind of base it on, you know, the tournament outcomes. We ran into a lot of logistical issues with that. Trying to get the tournament set up, have that where everybody can get to them. It just really kind of made a non-ideal experience for a lot of our people across the board, whether it was individual clubs feeling the pressure of needing to hold their tournament at specific times that didn't, you know, interfere with other events. It just was bad. So we looked at it and said, well, wait a second, let's see how leagues work in the rest of the world. And specifically, we looked at team sports, right? We looked at name any, you know, high school, college, professional sport. It's not a tournament-based league. It's a team-based league where a team goes and visits another team and fights it out. And so we created our league specifically around that model where, you know, I was talking to Kyle about this the other day. You know, our school is the Sacramento Historical Fencing Academy, but our team is the Sacramento Frifector, right? So we'll send our team over to the F.3 Academy in Fremont, where they have the Fremont Frifector as their team, right? And we'll have a matchup between a set number of people, not specific people, but a set size, right? Whether that was 3, 5, 7, how many ever fencers, you know, the league decided on. So let's just say 3 for now. We send 3 guys to F3, right? And we're going to fight as they're the home team. They get to set the rules. We'll have our exchanges. It'll be judged, you know, by the people in attendance. And then we report the results of that, you know, kind of fight back to the league and say, okay, Sacramento Frifector came to F3 and fought the Fremont Frifector, and this was the outcome of the match, right? And kind of the scoring. And so our plan was that each team would have, you know, a home game and an away game with all the rest of them. So we would be going to visit, we'd be coming to have them visit. And logistically, it made it really nice because the plan, as it was working out, was to schedule match days on people's normal club days, right? So I'm going to go down to, let's say I go to On Guard in Santa Rosa. I'm going to go on the day that they're holding their normal class. And maybe we take class with them either before or after as a visiting club, and then we get to have our exchanges. So we get kind of a, you know, a little cross-pollination of training methodologies, and then we get to fight as well. Right. So it makes that travel time worth it, because the reality is for us, you know, everything's going to be probably an hour and a half at least of travel time for one club to get to another. And so, yeah, that was kind of the format, is send teams to each other's schools, get to take a class, get to have some fights, get to record. So build that community, build that competition spirit, and you know, cross train with each other as well in the process.
How many clubs or teams do you have there within an hour and a half, couple hours?
So for the initial run of the tournament, we had 4 clubs that were involved in the initial run. It was us in Sacramento, On Guard in Santa Rosa, the Fremont guys, and then the Davenport School in Santa Clara. So those were the 4 schools that were involved in our first kind of year. We were keeping it small to make sure it worked. Let's see if I count beyond that. So we got those 4. East Bay is 5. There's a couple of clubs that are in the Berkeley, Oakland area that are, you know, could show up. There's Tussetti's. There's another Santa Clara. There's Santa Cruz. Probably about a dozen. Yeah, probably about a dozen all told. I mean, you know, we're spread out from each other, but like the Bay Area's got, God, I don't even know how many people in the greater area. Probably 8 or 9 million, you know, people all told in the greater area. So we have a decent, you know, population to draw on.
That's cool. That's cool.
That was really cool.
Okay, so just last thing I want to jump into on that. You've spent a lot of time talking about how intentionally you've built your culture and thought very, very deeply about how your tournament will be and all of that. And again, I'm not asking you to call anybody out unless you want to. I mean, we're here for the tea if you want to you want to throw it. But but what do you wish about what you have intentionally built would get into the HEMA tournament culture at large?
I'm gonna specifically point out, I think, to this last SoCal sword fight that we were at, where they had their
very cool,
right, where they had their open pools and they had the advanced pools, right? So I fought in the advanced tournament, and a bunch of my guys fought in the open tournament. The advanced tournament this year, beforehand, we were getting together, we were talking. There was a good-natured mentality where we all wanted to go out and have clean fights. Yeah, people wanted to win, but the main thing was to go out and fight clean, right? Fight with a good mentality. There wasn't a lot of animosity. Nobody, you know, was feeling that. And then you watch the open pools, and the open pools end up being a lot of people that are just coming out, and maybe this is the sport versus martial mentality. There's a lot of people that are just trying to win the game, right? They're fighting to the letter of the rules, not to the spirit of the rules. And so for me, no rule set is ever going to be perfect, right? Like anybody that wants to can always game. I don't care what the rule set is, you can game it. But I want people to fight to the spirit, right? Just because the rules say you can do a thing, you should have the mentality to ask yourself, well, should I, right? Like in the moment, should I do that thing, right? With ours, yeah, the rules say that, you know, the fight can continue on. We're not going to stop it after the exchange of blows happens. And so that's fine. But should you just sit there and slug away trying to hurt each other? Well, no, that's not the spirit of the rules. Yeah, you can swing, you know, probably 3 or 4 times before we're going to be able to get the stick down if you really wanted to. Don't, right? Like everything is a game. Every single tournament we're ever going to go to, every competition we're ever going to go to is going to be a game. Fight to the spirit of the rules, not to the letter of the rules, I guess is what I feel on that.
Makes sense, yeah. Because, just because I can one-handed throw a strike to your shin bones.
An excellent example. Example.
Like, we had a Gesellfesten where I was not running it, but I almost ran in and started arguing with somebody because they had thrown a one-handed shot that was clearly flat, clearly thrown as hard as can be. The person was not wearing full shin guards, and they just so happened to luckily clip the knee. Now, on another person, they had shattered off part of a catcher's shin guard with that same strike. And I'm like, that would have been a broken tibia or shin bone, whatever the fuck it's called. And thus, like, you would have not only have taken someone out of a fight, you would have injured and caused lots of damage. At tournaments where it's like, okay, I can throw somebody, I'm not going to throw them on their head. I'm not going to throw them on their shoulder. I'm going to try to put them on their back and stuff like that.
Which I think speaks to what you've mentioned a couple times, where we're not trying to recreate actual combat. That's kind of, at a certain point, that becomes ridiculous.
Right. We're all amateur fencers, right? Like, that's the reality. Even people running their own schools and everything, at the end of the day, we're still all fighting in amateur leagues. I have very strong feelings on the difference between amateur competition and professional competition. If we're doing this as a hobby for fun, even for a certain amount of prestige, we're not getting paid. We're not getting physically rewarded in such a way to take that risk. Now, on the other hand, if there was a professional league where every single fencer in it is getting paid to be there, that's their job.
Okay,
I have
you're right. That would
feelings
change things.
at that point.
Yeah,
I don't. Maybe this might sound. I've met Muhammad Ali. I got to meet him briefly when I used to work in tech. We made I worked for EA. We made the Knockout Kings game, and I got to briefly meet him at an event. And it was exciting, but it was also sad because at that point it was clear that the man was a robot.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that sad because he knew what he was getting into. No one is surprised that getting hit repeatedly in the head is going to have long-term repercussions. So as a professional doing that, that's what you're getting paid for, and I understand that, right? As long as it's an informed consent, cool, right? Wail away on each other. My issue is when you have people fighting, and that's going to be the biggest, I'm not going to name names, but that's really the biggest complaint I've ever had is people fighting at the wrong level for the event that they're at, right? Like the part Kyle had about, not wearing a shin guard and taking that. I don't like to fence with shin guards. I've never worn them. I wear knees. I rely on mobility and the way that I fight to keep my legs a tasty target that you're going to throw something at. But seriously, if somebody swung and hit me in the leg and shattered, my shin at that point, congratulations, buddy, you're getting a lawsuit, right? Because there are risks that I'm willing to take, and I'm willing to fight in such a way that, I get that my leg is at risk, but that's excessive. That's the kind of thing where you're trying to injure somebody, right? Accidents are going to happen. People are going to get hurt. It's the nature of the game that we play as a contact sport. So I'm not hesitant to that at all, right? Bones are going to get broken. I've broken bones. I've, gotten cuts. I work in food. I've cut myself tons of times. That's not an issue. But if you're trying to injure me, that's different.
I can see that. I can see the difference.
Well, before we round this sucker up, is there any projects or stuff that you're working on you'd like to plug before we get out of here?
Well, honestly, I'm right now working on getting through this year. It's been from a club standpoint, especially, right? It's been really difficult. We had originally planned this year to make our push to grow our club, move from having, just a space that we were renting from somebody else to kind of getting our own full-time space. That's our goal going forward still. We're going to have to reset, kind of all the timelines on it because while we've kept a lot of our members, the reality is we know that there's going to be a certain amount of attrition that's going to occur, and there's going to be rebuilding that comes from it. We have other projects as well that once the community as a whole starts to kind of recover, that we will be pushing to those. And again, I'm not going to get into it too much. Kyle knows what I'm talking about. Some of the different things that are in the development pipeline.
They're sexy. They're very sexy.
I'll say it again. Fine. Keep your secret.
Yeah. Let's just say just a little something for your feet at the moment, and then a few other designs that we're working on as well. That I will say this: if you're a historical fencer that maybe wants to have a slightly more period aesthetic to your gear, we're going to help with that. We have some great ideas that are coming down the line that also go into making it easier for us to run our club and with our particular goals in mind as well. So hopefully it'll be useful for us and for the broader community as well.
Well, Ted, it was a joy to have you on. I love the event. As soon as I can steal enough gasoline and road warrior my happy ass out there with a bandwagon of bros, we will be out there.
Hey man, I still have extended family in the Sacramento area. We can find a way to make this work. We can make this work.
So I'll let you know when it's going to be. As long as everything gets back to at least quasi normal next year. We typically do the last weekend of August before Labor Day. That's when we do it. The facility we use is great. They redo their floors on Labor Day weekend, which means if it happens the weekend before, that's all right. They're gonna get fixed.
What's all these scrapes and chips from? Don't worry about it. Just
redo it. Redo it.
Exactly. We'll just fix it next week.
Thank you so much for talking with us. I really enjoyed it. I really particularly enjoyed, and I want to compliment you on this, your very obvious care for fencers in general, both the ones that belong to your club and people coming in to fight at your events and events you've been at. That's really cool to see. I really love hearing that in your stories and in your explanations.
Hey, I want you guys to hit each other. I just want you to be able to come back and continue to hit each other. That's really the issue right there, right? It's not about being squeamish. It's not about anything like that. It's if we break our partners and we break our competitors, we're going to run out of people eventually.
Hey, pragmatism. Compassion from pragmatism. I'll take it. Exactly. Well, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful hour of chatting about rules and tournaments, and it's gotten me all excited to come to California and fight. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Well, hopefully we'll see you there, guys.
All right. Thank you, Ted. And this has been Fighting Words.
Okay. All right. And there's the end of it.
All right. Thank you,
Ted. This was cool, man.